Tekrar merhaba. Bugünkü üçüncü ve kongre
Welcome back. We are at the sixth session of the Congress, the second day of the day. The moderator is from Fatih Sultan Mehmet University, Professor Doktor Mehmet Balcı, Murat Balcı. I'd like to first invite introduce the speakers. He is also working in the Moody's Psychiatry Hospital. We are going to hear good news and bad news of the treatment of internet addiction. Professor Dr. Gül Karaçetin from Health Sciences University. Then we have Professor Dr. Kültürgün Öger, Professor Dr. Gül Karaçetin, working in Mazhar Osman Education and Research Hospital, is going to talk about the behavior of the parents to the children of gaming disorders. And then we have Mehmet Dinç, the Deputy President of Turkish Green Crescent. I also would like to share information regarding this meeting. There is a 5-minute time allocation at the end of the presentations for Q&A. Having said that, I'd like to give the floor to Murat Balcı and distinguished speakers. Thank you very much, Cansu Hanım. Here we are together with the sixth session organized by Green Crescent, the Technology Addiction Congress. This is a very important topic that we should discuss and debate. But it's such an important topic. Even though I am a person of law, technology addiction is not my field of expertise, but I am a father. I have 4 children. And this topic attracts my attention the most. Firstly, people and children spend time to play games, surf the internet. They use it so much, but when this very same children, when they connect the online training, they lose their attention in 3 to 5 minutes. That is also about internet, no? They still fiddle with the technological devices, but we experience this paradox as the parents. First of all, I'd like to give the floor to Professor Dr. Kültürgün Öger, who is going to talk about good news and bad news in the treatment of internet and technology addiction. You may have the floor.
Merhabalar.
Hello.
Ben bugün internet bağımlılığı tedaviden söz edeceğim.
I am going to talk about treatment in internet addiction, but rather than the content, I'll try to talk about the developments. We have some good and some bad news. So we'll talk about it as a whole. I'd like to introduce myself. I am a consultant in Green Crescent Consultancy Centers. I'm also the medical director of Moody's Hospital and also the founder of Bağımlılık Akademisi, the Academy of Addiction. We don't have enough information for treatment in our hands. That is why we would like to see how we can define our policies, our interventions. I'll try to show you some of these informations.
Öncelikle son yapılan çalışmalar ki
First of all, the recent researches, this dates back, this is this year's publication, it says that there is a very great similarity with substance use addiction. When the brain is imaged, the internet addiction and gaming addiction also has great similarities. The recent study shows us that at least one of the following issues have a similarity in the loss of inhibitory control. It is high impulsive. All the researchers say that. This is also widely seen in substance abuse. Is this good news or bad news? It's actually both.
Biz madde kullanım bozukluğu olarak ele alırsak,
because when we're talking about substance use disorder, there will be many similarities in our interventions. All the treatment options in addiction can also be used in internet addiction. So using all the other addiction treatment options is possible. And our general approach will be similar, despite nuances. Bad news is, internet addiction is not a simple matter. It is as bad as substance use. So there is a need for substantial approach and effective treatment options. And it requires a long-term approach. Because generally speaking, especially the substance use addiction is a chronic disease, and this is how we should treat internet addiction too. And we should have the same expectations in the prognosis as well. Because it is very similar to substance use, we see that prefrontal cortex and striatum is affected, as shown by this 2019 publication. There are many questions. Which location of the brain is affected? We were not able to find answers in the past. Now it's clear. We have replies. Especially the systematic collections say that prefrontal cortex and striatum are affected. This is not a single article, it is the result of a collection. Prefrontal cortex and striatum is also the same location where substance use affects in the brain. Like I said, as I mentioned in the slide before, in the treatment, the substance use treatment requires similar approaches. But there's something important to talk about. When there's alterations in the brain, it is very difficult to work with that. The diagnosis criteria requires 12 months, and you need a very strict and regular follow-up. So when there is a change in the brain, an alteration in the use of internet addiction, we should find it, define it, and then it shows us one thing. You should intervene before that change in the brain happens. So before the addiction gets stronger and deeper, it is very important to intervene. If you wait for deepening, if the problem goes bigger, if you intervene after it is a big issue, you will have a more hard time receiving feedback and treatment. So before the issue goes out of hand, before it affects the person wholly, before there's a change in the brain, the intervention or the response should take place. That is why it is very important to detect and diagnose the internet addiction in the early period. It should be our first aim. So if one person is playing a lot of games, and if they are asking, oh, am I addicted or not? It is the time, or it could even be earlier than asking that question, because if you wait for the issue to go more difficult, we will encounter even more difficult situations in the treatment. When there is moderate to severe internet addiction, we encounter many difficult issues. The recent researchers say that moderate and severe internet connection also brings about a lot of problems, such as severe mental issues and physical problems. And this is actually, this has an impact on all the components of the definition of health by WHO. What is our responsibility is to be able to differentiate between mild and severe symptoms. When you can find and or diagnose the mild effects, you can intervene. Especially in severe internet addiction, there will be additional problems. So there is a need for an intense and active treatment plan. Especially in the severe and moderate addictions, we should not undermine the issue. Because when we are speaking of internet addiction, it sounds like it's not a big deal or a disease. And actually, I used to be one of those people in the past. 10 to 15 years ago, when people were talking about internet addiction, I was saying that it shouldn't be a disease. Come on, we are talking about heroin addiction, but internet should not be such an issue. But throughout the years, I have realized that it is a big disease. It should be taken into account seriously, where all the treatment options should be available. So we should intervene before the things go out of hand, and it will be more effective then. Is there an effective treatment model? An efficient psychosocial treatment is not found yet. You will see there are many researchers, many clinical trials. There are certain methods that claim to be effective. There are certain systems, there are manuals and such. But scientifically speaking, there is no significant, efficient method. One of the reasons why, because the sample size is very small, or there is no control group. There is no information about suitability to the treatment. So all these findings that we have cannot be generalized. And we cannot say that there is a scientific significance over one in comparison to another. There are certain treatment options we think that are good, but are they efficient? This is the first question. Second question. Then, the programs that we develop or the ones we implement, we should use research methods that are much more careful in measuring the success. There are many studies as such, both in Turkey and in the world, but we need better methods to measure. The science has basic methodology and main rules, and we all have to abide by them. And internet addiction is in the early period. We can't work too intensively on that, but from now on, we hope that all the researches that will be conducted in the field will have a better quality. From the perspective of cognitive psychology, there are differences as well. When you take a look at the diagnosis criteria, one of the most important criteria is preoccupation, spending a lot of time. But there are subcategories as well. Wrong beliefs about the game, inflexible and unsuitable rules about the game, attaching great importance to the game for the value of oneself and playing games for social acceptance. So, when a person is playing too much games, but that's not enough information to us. But good news about the fields that we're going to work and about components, we have certain information. We have to work with the wrong beliefs about the game. But first, we have to identify us and make people identify them too. The rules about the game should be more clear.
güçlendirmemiz gerekiyor.
We need to strengthen the value of oneself, and the attachment of importance should change too. We should make sure that social acceptance takes place in other platforms. It's not enough to say don't spend too much time with games. It's not a significant step. We need to work on all these 4 categories.
İnternet bağımlı tedavisinde en çok kullanılan yöntemlerden
One of the most commonly used methods in internet addiction is CBT. There are many researchers claiming that CBT is very effective. But when we take a look at the systematic collections and meta-analysis, this is actually conducted in 2019, yes, cognitive behavior therapy has impact on a certain extent, but it's not adequate on many different other fields. This is proven by many different researchers. This is a collection of high number of publication studies. Yes, it decreases the symptoms of addiction and as well as the depression. As you know, there's a high correlation between internet connection and depression. There's another mental health issue that is highly correlated is anxiety. But when we take a look at the studies, they do not really focus on anxiety. And there is no impact on the time spent in internet. So CBT is effective to a certain extent, is beneficial in certain issues, but not enough. So we need to come up with additional methods next to or additional to the cognitive behavioral therapy to increase the effective treatment. It is mandatory. There are also many people who do not respond to treatment of cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's a need for a multidisciplinary approach or an eclective approach. All of these approaches should also have CBT involved. I think it's very important to have this component because, as you see, there are certain areas where it is very effective, but treatment is a whole, and in order to establish this whole, you need to add the issues into this system. Now, short period therapies are also effective. This study shows us that with this control, short-term treatment, baseline, middle treatment, post-treatment, and follow-up. So short period of treatment is also effective. There's also bad news. This is a group that was involved in a treatment that lasted 15 weeks to sessions 8 times. So it's not that really short. This data also shows us another thing. Short-term approaches, short-term interventions won't be effective. The interventions should at least take 15 weeks. You need group activities and individual approach as well. What is good news? After you follow up on them on a short period of time, with consultancy, we don't get good response and we lose our hope. But as you can see, even though these methods that are named as short therapies, actually they take a long time. So when people don't respond, we shouldn't lose hopes. We should make sure that people stick to the therapy. We should follow up on them at least for 3 months. So we should actually pace ourselves. We shouldn't lose hope. We should work on that.
Yöntemler geliştiriyorlar, disiplin yöntemleri oluşturuyorlar.
And the families are developing some discipline methods, but they are expecting a very quick answer. Yeah, we should not expect a response before 3 months. And in my clinical practices for the families, I advise do not change the rules before 3 months because frequently changing rules are not helping. Therefore, the families and the psychologists, when dealing with this problem, we should adjust the time period and we should be ready for a long long period effort. So, for the new psychotherapies, are there any developments about it?
Metakognisyonların önemli olduğu gösteriliyor internet bağımlılığı.
Metacognitions are important for internet addiction. Thinking about thinking, these metacognitions. And the thought suppressions and impulsiveness are metacognitions, the mediators of these metacognitions. These are the factors that are creating metacognitions through thought suppression and impulsiveness. What's the good news here? For them to be effective and to include them in the process, the treatments will be influential and these are effective. The third wave, behavioral and cognitive behavioral treatments. It can be metacognitive or mindfulness or ACT. We see that this can be influential here, effective here. And to be honest, these are also effective for addiction disorders. Therefore, we expect them to be effective for this. And the studies also confirm it. Maybe in addition to cognitive behavioral CBT treatment, a third wave will be added, third generation. Mindfulness is very important, I think, because especially for impulsiveness and for thought suppression, mindfulness is quite effective for thought suppression and impulsiveness. Another good news is this 5-year follow-up studies, monitoring studies. This is a study in 2015, and game addiction is decreasing in time. And behavioral addictions are decreasing even if there is no treatment, no intervention is made. The good news is this will recover, these cases will recover. But here, the bad news is, if they recover in 5 years' time, but what they lose in that 5-year time period, their school, academic performance, professional life, social skills, physical problems, there are many losses. And these losses are quite important for us. But even if you say self-recovery, we see that studies show that there is even spontaneous and self-recoveries without any interventions. We see the same for all behavioral. After a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, they change in these cases. And they are not happy about it. They don't have lots of friend circles, almost no friends, because they missed that period of life and they lost those skills in life. Therefore, even if the cases don't change, there is no improvement in the change, and the treatment should be continued. Even if we cannot decrease the addiction symptoms, psychosocial development in other areas of life is important. So, a summary of what we have explained here, these 3 monitoring studies summary, the prevalence is 1.6 to 9.6. This is impulsivity, social skills, lack of social skills. And internet addiction is more prevalent among those with impulsivity and social skill deficiency. The main significant factors are impulsivity and lack of social skills. After 1.5 or 2 years later, the prevalence decreases 1.5 to 7.6%. The prevalence decreases. So internet addiction is decreasing, and it's a bigger decrease in 5-year monitoring or follow-up. But we see that there are studies suggesting that internet addiction decreases in time. And 14 to 50% of the cases are recovering. 50 to 86 are becoming chronic. And more than half are chronic and almost half are recovering. And here, what's the decisive factor about recovery or becoming chronic? The psychologists and therapists should work on, even the families should work on. Which cases, which incidents are becoming chronic after 1.5 years? Those with lower academic performance. What does it tell to us? If a young person is suffering internet addiction, we should support their academic performance, because we know that as the academic performance increases, there will be a decrease in internet addiction. There are many ways of supporting academic performance of young people. Another factor is the parental relations, inconsistent or unstable parental relations. As if the parental relations continue to be conflicting, then the recovery is not, they cannot recover, and the problem becomes chronic when they have unstable parental relations. Another factor is causing chronic is developing depression, anxiety, and social phobia, social anxiety. If these problems develop, then it becomes a vicious circle. It goes into depression and a place, and social phobia is developed, and it becomes a vicious circle. Some detox, sometimes days completely free of game, even weeks free of game or internet. Yeah, we will decrease, and they will decrease it. Or even if we do nothing, if we have any suspicion of depression and anxiety, even medication use will decrease the gaming amount time, and it will be a decisive factor for recovery. But there's a bad news, and there is COVID factor, pandemic factor. The prevalence increased from 3.5% to 4.3%, a 23% increase in the prevalence. The studies show that the prevalence of addiction increased 23%, and internet addiction test score from 3.3% to 8.7%, which means a 20 times increase in internet addiction test scores. And we don't know what future will bring, and it's a harbinger of the future time. After the pandemic, how are we going to cope, and how are we going to recover? It remains a big challenge still, because during the pandemic, the prevalence increased, but we don't know if these addictions will continue or will they recover after pandemics. One of the good news is the ICD-11 diagnostic category has been included to ICD-11. The gaming addiction has been added here, but it changes a lot because now it's treated and recognized as a disease. I would like to extend my thanks to Put Effort for including this into ICD-11. It changed the perception of internet gaming by the society, by the people, by the professionals. Yeah, it can cause to addiction, and it can cause disorders, and this is recognized. And when we have this diagnostic category, I believe that the treatment methods will also improve parallel to this. I have given many good and bad news. And the most important side of this good news is that they will contribute to our efforts, and the bad news is a warning for us that we should be alerted about and be careful about, but we have to be more creative, come up with more innovative methods, and early detection is quite important. Early diagnosis is very important. I hope this bad news will evolve into good news in time, and the internet addiction will become a curable disease. And the best is that finding preventive methods before they develop into a disease or disorder. I firmly believe that we have a mandate, we have an obligation for preventing this, both the media, the society, the academics, and the sector, because it's becoming a very widespread social problem after COVID-19 era. We'll continue to put efforts. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. We would like to extend our thanks to Professor Gültekin Ege for this valuable presentation, and I will keep it very brief. Another very esteemed colleague, Professor Gül Karaçetin, I will give the floor to The parental behaviors in children and adolescents with internet gaming disorders. The parental attitudes and behaviors in children and adolescents with gaming disorders. So you have my voice. I'll be sharing my screen. Says the speaker. Yes, we have perfect voice, and we'll see the screen sharing. Yeah, we have the screen sharing. Yeah, the title of the presentation is the parental attitudes for in children and adolescents with internet gaming disorders. Before beginning my presentation, I would like to extend my thanks to Professor Dr. Mücahit Öztürk and the Green Crescent Society, because internet and gaming addiction has disruptive effects on children's and adolescents' mental health. I would like to extend my thanks for their invitation to 5th Congress. Bakırköy Child Psych. We have an internet addiction polyclinic at our facility, and the data that I will be presenting in this presentation were collected from the children who were treated. It's based on our own clinical observations, and I would like to extend my thanks to our whole team for their efforts in the polyclinics. Why this subject matter is so important, why it matters, because internet and gaming disorder or addictive internet use is very critical, is affecting school and academic performance, and irreparable losses in academic performance and academic life and schooling of children. And the cure and the treatment is very difficult when it becomes an addiction. As Professor Kultegan said, this study is very important. Before developing the addiction, the preventive, primary preventive efforts. And the components of these preventive efforts is identifying the risk factors and protective components. Our own observations and scientific literature suggest that for a child to prefer an addiction or to develop an addiction disorder, it should be a child under risk. Not every child using internet is not developing addiction. Which childs are in risk category? Alone children, children with weak family connections, family and parental conflicts, and repetitively general mental health disorders. But for family behaviors and family attitudes, there are studies for internet addiction, but for gaming disorders, it's very limited. This child under risk sometimes is introduce some internet technology, and its reward system is stimulated, and if there is any distortions about the child himself or herself or about the world around, if he or she believes that he's only good at internet, and if it is a relief factor for internet, it develops internet gaming disorder. When we have a literature screening, what is the relationship between parental behaviors and internet gaming disorder? Mostly we have studies on internet addiction, and there is a widespread discourse that youngs suggest that it is an important factor that there is no parental control to access to internet or any limitation on access to internet. And this study has some important conclusions. Negligence behavior and excessive protective and authoritarian attitude is a risk factor for internet addiction. And psychological autonomy subscale scores when we look, and there is a decrease on internet addiction behaviors. The more the children have autonomous, their addictive behavior are decreasing. So when we look at the studies, generally, this for psychiatric disorders and its relations to this case, its semi-structured interviews are very few, and mostly it's a scale study, and sample studies and scale studies are single-sided, self-reported by parents and the children, and there are some contradictions. And internet gaming disorder and parental attitude, we could not have two-way studies. And Esra Bulanık coach the PhD dissertation thesis for studying the parental attitudes of and its impacts on the internet gaming disorders in children. And so it was recently published in an international journal. Parental attitude is very important for general child and the adolescent cognitive and mental health, but for internet it's extremely important. If we look at parental attitudes, there are two aspects of parental attitudes. One is the emotional connection between parent and the children, and the other is setting limits. These two are important, having connections and setting limits. For is the most healthy for and a very sincere relationship between the parent and the children, and being careful about the communication with the child while setting the limits, explaining the child the reasons and the justifications for these limits and the rules, and sometimes revising these rules and limits. And another important is for this competent parenting, these families are coherent and consistent about these rules. And internet psychoeducation to the families of the children, and we have come to observe that families have confusion about setting limits. Yeah, for setting limits, they either say, I cannot let the child do anything, completely giving up setting limits, or how much food they will take, which clothes they will wear, all very detailed, very tiny bit details they have, and intervening to every detail, setting too much limits. And on both ends, it is not giving good results for a child's mental health. The health is two keywords here: safety and health. Security and health of child should be determined by the families. Child should not use substance or things that is endangering or threatening the security and the health of the children. It should be predetermined rules declared to the child. We should have a frame of set of rules, and there should be a room of autonomy for children. How much food child will have, when will he or she play, or when will he or she study, deciding for the friends. And the child should be encouraged to take responsibility for houseworks, and it should also develop the self-confidence of the child while setting the limits. And what behaviors remains out of the scope of this competent parentship when this balance is distorted, too much of setting limits, and when it's in that sincere and close relationship, and children are deprived of this close relationship with extreme oppressive and authoritarian attitude. Here there is a cold and distant relationship, and it's a one-way, setting limits on one way without interaction and without explaining the reasons and justifications. Child's submission and obedience is requested. And as we have discussed, instead of developing self-confidence, there is a punishment too much used without, and unfortunately, children are damaged both mentally and physically, and it has some negative results for mental health of children, this type of parental attitude. And on the other extreme end of this extreme oppressive, extreme tolerant, child-centered family, child can do anything, and their parental and children roles are mixed and confused, and this child is insatiable and cannot take responsibility and cannot set limits for himself. Child is insatiable and never learns the limits. And unfortunately, these children have very significant problems at school and in social environments about observing the social limits and behaviors, and extreme protective attitude. And except for these two, this is a third, and this is extreme control. And a very family checks the children's responsibilities and makes the decision on behalf of the child, extreme controlling. And this is also a parental behavior that we observe in children with internet addiction, because child is not making the decisions and taking responsibility, and child cannot develop competence about using the cognitive and mental skills for making decisions and taking responsibility. So if child had no experience and never used that part of the brain for making decisions, unfortunately, it's not easy for that child to make decisions for himself or herself. One of the most important negative consequences is child develops a dependent personality and have difficulty in saying no to the friends. And lastly, the imbalanced and indecisive attitude. Here, when the father and mother, the parents somehow have different opinions about setting the limits, and this dissenting of opinion is explicitly displayed in the presence of the child, and they display different attitudes, and they do not communicate a clear and uniform message, and child is confused by it. And we have carried out this study, planned this study to evaluate these parental attitudes impacts on internet addiction. And for children who applied for the first time, who did not have psychiatric treatment, the males between the age of 12 to 18, Dr. Esra, according to DSM-5 criteria, the internet gaming disorder that is diagnosis, and it was a semi-structured interview with these children, and they used these criteria for sampling. And we have used some scales for internet addiction tests, as it's widely known. If the score is above 18, then internet addiction diagnosis is placed. But we believe that the golden standard here is the psychiatric interview is important. And to test our hypothesis, the test we used is parenting style inventory. Parenting style inventory PSI. There are three dimensions. One is acceptance, involvement, strictness, supervision, psychological autonomy. This is parental style index or test. From the mother's perspective, how parental attitude research instrument is used, and there are 5 aspects: extreme motherhood, democratic attitude, and equalitarian, and there are 5 other, and this is the test. And we have used back depression test and anxiety test. And if we have a look at the results of this study, both groups were matching the number of siblings and educational level, socioeconomic level. There were not significantly statistical difference about the profile of the sampling, and there was no significant difference about the education status and employment status. But separated family structure was significantly higher among and this was a repetitive factor. And according to a study in 2013 in the literature for children with video gaming addiction, single parenting had impacts, and there is limited supervision on the adolescent, and internet use and internet gaming disorder risk could be increased. Single parenting could increase because lack of supervision. When we look at parental styles and attitudes, from the mother's parents' perspective, there was no difference from the control group, but from the adolescent's perspective, 2 subtests of the 3 tests, there was differences from adolescent self-report, and this was acceptance and psychological autonomy. For acceptance and interest dimension, how much affectionate and receptive and accept the family, and psychological autonomy subtest the democratic attitude of the parents and how much they are implementing it, how much they are encouraging the individual autonomy of the children. On the left side, parental perspective attitudes, parental self-reporting of their, and on the right side, we see the children's reporting of parental attitudes, PCI children. Children with internet gaming disorder have significant differences in 2 subtests. Children, when compared to control group, children with internet gaming disorders think that their parents have lower interest or attention to them, and they are less accepted, and their autonomy is they are less allowed to be autonomous. This is the perception of children with internet gaming disorders. And this was quite interesting finding for us. And we try to understand this through a literature study, and we have checked on the acceptance and attention or interest side and why they report that they are accepted less by parents or the less interest by parents. This was stated by Young. Young says, if an adolescent cannot have the enough attention and interest in the family, and if it does not have an environment that's open to communication, unfortunately, internet seems to an avoidance and an escapism to internet, and these adolescents are exposed to harmful impacts of internet, and it was overlapping, it was confirming our findings of the study. When we look at the second subtest, our adolescents with gaming disorders reported that their parents allow less for their psychological autonomy, and as the psychological autonomous scores increases, the internet addiction probability decreases. The studies, it was confirming the previous studies, and this psychological autonomy is a protective factor for internet addiction. And when we carry out a more detailed literature study, we have come to see that this is a repetitive finding. Low interest and acceptance and low psychological autonomy for the same for gambling addiction, substance and alcohol addiction. It was the same, and this was conceptualized and in affectionist control. This is called affectionist control in English, and sometimes it is translated into English for low maternal care or it's affectionist control. And this lack of affection and extreme protective, low maternal care, high maternal protection, affectionless control, this is called. And it is developed in two ways. One is by low maternal care and high maternal protection. One is when children have lower affection by the families, and if they are not supported, and these adolescents especially, they have more negative interactions with their environment and peers. These adolescents, unfortunately, do not go out too much, do not have interaction with their peers, and their self-confidence and self-esteem is low, and they are avoiding social interaction. And this is a way that is leading to addiction. The second way is, and if in case of extreme neglect of children, in hypothalamo pituitary adrenal axis and dopamine system is distorted. Here, the figure that we see on the right side is group 1, the cocaine addiction groups, and group 1 are the children who were neglected in childhood, patients with childhood neglect, and group 2 is children who were not neglected but who are addicted to cocaine. Stress-induced cortisol and other some hormones are higher with children who were neglected in childhood. But there is a very important distinction we need to make here. I would like to go further and elaborate about parental affection. Parental affection is multidimensional, empathic approach. An affection and different dimensions of it. This should not be just considered. Somehow, if the parent interest and attention distorts the psychological autonomy, no, an optimum and a competent parenting is not distorting the psychological autonomy, but it's guiding the child and allowing the child to express him or herself. And this is a protective factor for internet addiction. What I would like to emphasize here is, for psychological autonomy should not be confused with no limits or setting no limits at all. Psychological autonomy does not mean that there is the lack of limits. There should be limits when it will start, when it will end. This is protective for addiction. There is a fine line here. The authoritarian and extreme pressurizing parenthood, if the rules are not justified and explained to children, and if there are limits there are problems about setting the limits, then children have lower perception of their autonomy. And providing psychological training to families is very important. Yeah, setting the limits for psychological autonomy, but taking the decisions and involvement of the children in decision-making process, and setting the limits that are adequate and appropriate for child's developmental level and age, and revising these limits when needed. And in line with the literature studies, the time period used on internet, and that is should be limitations, and supervision that was significantly lower for setting the limits. And this shows how much important setting the limits is. Unfortunately, the most widespread problems that we see with the family is when the families bring the children, the addiction is already developed, and they try to eliminate this addiction without replacing or substituting a pattern instead of this, without curing the anxiety or depression of the children, just focusing on the time spent on internet. Therefore, for each case, we need individualized formulation. Why the child developed this addiction? We try to understand the underlying factors first, and we try to understand the time outside of the internet. How are they doing and what they are doing? And this became more visible in our study. And children with internet gaming disorder was differentiated. We don't have time with families, and we are happy about it, they say. And this also have some clinical implications, and clinically significant. And previously it was reported that family activities are very influential in preventing internet addiction. And for children with internet use at addiction severity, when they have had full-time access and they are complaining about lack of parental or intra-family activities. And we have come to realize that this is very important for preventive efforts, and this is a repetitively reported both by children and for parents. The age starting to use internet is much lower. They start to use internet much earlier. And this is important, how early we should take the preventive measures. And when we look at depression and anxiety tests of mothers of both groups, only back depression test scores were different. It was much higher in the group with internet gaming disorder group.
Çalışmalarda bildirilmiş bir bulgu. Fakat bizim
this was a late reported finding, as it's a cross-sectional study. Yeah, it's like a casual relationship. Yeah, these children are spending too much time on internet. Is it causing the depression, or mother's depression is a risk factor for spending too much time on internet? Unfortunately, because of the methodology of our study, we could not understand it. The prospective studies could focus on this casual relationship. It's also a very important subject. Psychiatric comorbidities are very widespread. Most of these children have some additional comorbidities, and most widespread psychiatric disorder is attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, and later comes social anxiety disorder, which is followed by depression, and depending on the control group, there are some other comorbidities. And the relationship between the mother's depression and children's depression and anxiety and social anxiety disorder, yeah, there is a correlation between mother's depression and children's anxiety disorder and social anxiety disorder. Yeah, if the mother's depression is above the cutoff or threshold, the children's anxiety and social anxiety disorder is much prevalent. Due to time limitations, I will just wrap up here. We had a logistic regression analysis, and from the family-related factors and the opinions of the family for bringing up children, that is the statistical significant the variables, and back depression scores were the variable factors that we have analyzed. According to this analysis, if there is no setting limit for other areas other than the internet, it's closely related to internet addiction, and we have interpreted it If a child is, we should not see it just from the perspective of using the internet. The child's life we should have a holistic assessment, and all risk factors should be evaluated and assessed together, not just isolated review of internet use. And for setting the limits, if a child is having problems about setting the limits, this is a risk factor for developing addiction for that child. And limitations of this study, of course, there were some limitations on our study. This should be interpreted considering these limitations. Our sampling was comparatively a small sampling. Yeah, we could have better or more elaborated results, detailed results, and conclusions with a wider or bigger sample. And our observation is children who caused physical injuries to mothers, fathers, and other relatives could not be brought to polyclinics, and a severe internet addiction disorder cases do not apply to, and it was only male children that we had, and it was not a homogeneous, to create a homogeneous sampling. We have included only boys, and we have no interpretation, or our study is not giving ideas about the gaming disorders in girl children. It was only boy children, and we have given only the tests for mothers. There was no semi-structured psychological interview with the children, anxiety and depression level of the children, and the relationship to psychiatric disorders in children. We have to be very cautious about, because we only applied the tests and did not have a structured interview with children. We did not have a test applied for fathers, only for mothers. We have a separate unit and department for substance use, CHEMATEM that we call, and there we are referring to substance use disorders to there. Therefore, chemical addiction could not be used as a comorbidity, and it was a longitudinal, longitudinal, and it is an intersection evaluation. So we believe that we have some important conclusions for this study, and lesser interest by the parents, and when they are allowed lesser autonomy, and parental involvement is very important for treatment, and mother and father parental involvement should be increased, and psychological training should be given about parental relationship, and there are many high groups of comorbidity, and for the and these are the factors that we should take into consideration.
İnternet kullanımına koyulan sınırda daha uzun süre izin verildiği gibi internet kullanımına koyulan kota sınırlaması ve internet dışı alanlarda koyulan sınırın daha az olması, özellikle internet
because of the quota being low and making limitations in the fields other than internet actually indicate how important the parental supervision is. The kids have said that they did less activity with their parents, and while planning the treatments, it was important for us to emphasize the in-family interactions. The age of starting to use the internet is much lower in this group, and the daily and weekly internet usage time is quite important. I would like to thank you all for your kind attention. Esteemed Professor, thank you for your presentation. This has been a technical, comprehensive, and informative presentation. We would like to thank you once again for your kind presentation. Now, I would like to give the floor to Deputy President of Turkish Green Crescent Society, Dr. Mehmet Dinç, and he will be talking about the virtual world of the children and youth, a guide for the parents and trainers. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to greet you all respectfully. I would like to extend my gratitude to all the people who have contributed. I would like to share one of my studies with you, and it has been mentioned by Professor Gültekin and Professor Gülşen as well. It is about making use of internet without turning into an addiction. Therefore, the parental supervision is highly important here, and the parents actually experience a confusion. So much is being said about this millennium, and I don't really think that any of them really expresses the youth. But if we should actually give a name, maybe the digital natives could be considered as a comprehensive term for all the young people across the world. So this is something common shared by them. They are digital natives, and digital native term is not actually decreasing the confusion, but it actually increases the confusion because they are engaged with technology and because they are unable to think a life without technology. Do not really eliminate their questions. The parents have always had question marks in their minds, and those question marks are increasing day by day. And the lives of the children are restricted to a great extent. So I would like to share this research with you first. This was conducted in 2003 with the youth and adolescents, and the adults and the adolescents were compared in 14 different areas, including taking responsibility and guiding. And it was found that the adolescents are competent enough in these 14 responsibility areas. And additionally, in respect of the restriction of the lives of the youth, there is a study from the States. The adolescents are contained in a restriction 10 times more than an adult in the States, and 2 times more than a soldier in the American military, and 2 times more than a prisoner. So this is the time when they are truly having a very difficult time. So are we doing the same thing for the digital world? And I conducted a study on this because they are the digital natives. They know the digital world much better than us. And are we actually structuring their lives because of our old habits? Right before the pandemic, I was in Australia as a visiting lecturer of Melbourne University, and one of the schools asked for my help, and I told them that we can do a group work as long as they are volunteers. But once they came, I found that they were actually volunteers by the school. So they were the labeled young people in the school, and they were expecting me to treat them. And with those young people, I conducted a study, and it was about where the parents were actually misunderstanding their children. And then we created a common document together with them, and it was a guide for the parents with respect to use of internet. And we also came up with examples. And another one was a performance for the parents based on outside witnessing. And while working on this, I made use of narrative therapy, and I will tell you about them. David Epstein, the founder of narrative therapy, is saying that how can one really understand the feelings and the thoughts of the other while the experience belongs to the youth? And for that very reason, how can we really talk about some other's life without knowing their life? And that's why I named this study You Can Ask Me, because the parents are confused about the internet use of their children. They look at the books, and I thought that it is not a very bad idea to ask the kids, and I wanted to give them an idea. In my study, I tried to find out the capabilities of the children in the digital world, and I did not really position myself as a researcher who is conducting some research on them, but I actually positioned myself as a co-researcher. And one of the important purposes here was not really to train them about something, but to announce their experiences to the outer world, especially their parents and their teachers. So what did we do? It was a 6-week work. What was our purpose? Our initial purpose was to further enrich the alternative stories of the children. There is a dominant story around them, like they are using the internet so much they never leave their mobile phones, but we wanted to see if there is an alternative story as well. Can we see their use in a different way? And secondly, the problems they come up with. We wanted to know their skills and knowledge more, because their parents and teachers are actually worried, but we wanted to understand what is happening really and what are the successes of the kids with respect to internet usage. And while doing that, we did not really want them to give us the right answer or the expected answer, but to tell us about their own ideas. And then we had a definitional ceremony with their parents and teachers in which they witnessed their works. And we looked for answers to the following questions. What are the dominant ideas about the digital world? And how right are they? What are the dominant ideas about the digital world, the relations of the youth, and how right are they? How do the youth define their digital lives, and which skills are they using while using the digital technologies? Which values are they trying to protect? What brings what does the use of digital technologies bring to the lives of the youth? How can the parents and teachers also make use of the digital technologies? And how can the parents and the teachers help their kids with respect to the challenges in the digital world? So we centered the knowledge of the youth, and we defined the preferred stories of the children. We told them and retold them. And while doing that, there is an approach of narrative therapy as well. And narrative therapy says that people can speak for themselves and they do not need the others to talk on behalf of them. If there is a problem, you should actually ask the person experiencing the problem. And what we were looking after was to find out the rare information that belonged to those people. Such rare information are always ignored by the others, and we wanted to reveal that. And as a result, we wanted to create a guideline for the parents by reviewing the rare knowledge. What should the parents and teachers know about facilitating of the digital technologies, and what should the parents and teachers know about the benefit of digital world relations, and how can they help me making use of the digital technologies more? So those were the questions we asked, and that was the guideline we came up with. In the guideline, you will find very basic information working with the digital addictions since 2006. And this is one of the simplest guidelines that I have seen. And once it was completed, I was the youth says digital technologies can be used to facilitate your lives. Secondly, no. The digital technologies help us alleviate our stress, deal with the difficult times, and feel better. Notice, the use of digital technologies is not loss of time, waste of time. Distinguish, there is a very big difference between learning something new and wasting your time. Technologies promote, instead of telling us turn that off immediately, encourage us to be engaged in alternative activities. Show if you can use the digital technologies in the right way and useful way, you can be a very effective role model for us. Get help. The teachers can use the digital technologies for better and attractive classes, and they can ask for our help and please teach us how to use the digital technology as well. Help, please help us limit our digital technology usage when we are experiencing sleep problems or other problems. And we're using the digital technologies to express ourselves, and you can also use the digital technologies to express yourselves. Don't be addicted, and help us not be addicted. Respect, please respect our privacy while we're using the digital technologies. Believe if we have a good relation, you can trust us about the use of digital technologies. So all of them have their stories. I will not be telling you each and every detail because of the limit of time. There is one thing that is highly important. They didn't say trust us no matter what. I did not write any of these words on my own. I only took down their notes. Therefore, this is not my text. This is the text of the young people. And they said, if we have a strong relation, then you can count on us. And they were really very honest with that. Give us responsibility, help us, and give us real life responsibilities to help us stay away from the excessive use. Professor Gültekin also mentioned some clients may recover from the gaming disorder or from the other addictions, and the youth say that if they were to have meaningful real life responsibilities, they will recover them by themselves. And Professor Gültekin has also underlined, how about the lost years? Even if there is a recovery, and this is not for sure, this is just a probability, how about the talent and skills lost in those lost years? Understand, please try to see our world and our life from our perspective. Allow, while using the digital technologies, allow us to take our own responsibility. Share, if you share the websites that you like with us, we can better use the digital technologies. You can talk to us about your worries around the digital technologies. Please listen to us for us to share our experience with digital technologies to you and learn. You can learn something from us with respect to use of digital technologies. Appreciate when we have success in digital technologies. It's important for us to be appreciated. So this is one of the things that they complain the most. We don't necessarily have to do something harmful on the digital medium. We can also be doing something useful as well, and they are telling that they want to be appreciated in this regard. Therefore, we are unable to be motivated with respect to beneficial use, and they're saying that if we are appreciated in this regard, we will develop more behavior in this regard and develop. Please do not call us lazy boys or couch potato. Please try to use a more positive language. So there is this concept, couch potato. It means they are never standing up from the couch, and they say that language must be changed. C, the digital technologies help us develop our relations with the people, discover new information, and learn the talents we cannot really learn in the real life. So that was a very simple yet a very comprehensive guideline they created, and it is not difficult to implement, but it can help them a lot if it is done. And narrative therapy has an idea around there is always an alternative story with respect to internet and computer addiction of the children. We should be interested in revealing the stories that do not feed the problems of the people. When the people discover their alternative stories and own them, they will go beyond solving their problems. So when we emphasize the internet's addiction, we only thicken the problem story. But if we emphasize the alternative stories, then we will thicken those stories and we will help them find new stories. So, in conclusion, what did we achieve? David Attenborough says, everyone has the right to define their experiences with their own words. So, I don't really think that it was right to talk about the youth without their experiences, and you also saw the experiences of the students at the high school level, and in the next session you will listen to the university level students. And during this study, three things helped me clarify myself. The youth use the digital media for staying in touch with one another, and there were 6 kids who were considered to be troublesome in the school when I started the study, and they said staying in touch is more important than entertainment. So staying in touch and contact was highly important to them, and giving them this opportunity will be highly crucial. Secondly, the youth also use the digital technologies to stay away from bullying, and they said the digital technologies help us relieve our stress and stay away from conflicts with our parents, and it distracts us against the challenges during difficult times. One of the young people that I saw was living in a very problematic district of Melbourne, and there were criminal gangs. He stayed at home in order not to be engaged with those criminal gangs. So they are using the internet to a great extent, and they found out a method to deal with that problem. So the factors behind their use should be taken into consideration. And I've also witnessed that, although the adults do not really think that the youth is using the digital technologies wisely, they said, we are trying to protect the following values while using the digital technology. Not to change ourselves in order to make the others happy, to protect our reputation, to be aware of the negative impacts, and to keep our moral compass in our hands, and to continue our principles with respect to friendship and trust. So those were the perfect summary. And this is what they said by themselves, and that was highly interesting to me. So why was this important? It is important because there is a very big confusion about how to approach the young people while they are having challenges, and the activities of Turkish Green Crescent Society has been highly important, and this is very critical. And you have listened to the team, John Sanders, Natasha, Joel, Daniel, and Zolt, and many other people who spoke, and me and Tolga Arıcak were engaged in the team, and the criteria of ICD-11 were prepared with respect to gaming disorder, and one study indicates that only 22 out of 289 psychiatrists know how to help the children when they come with a gaming disorder, and the other 267 psychiatrists have no idea. So we can easily see that the people who know what they do are very low, and their experiences, their wisdom, their knowledge can shed a light on our path. Thank you very much for your attention. Professor Mehmet, thank you very much for this great presentation. Professor Mehmet is working on this guideline. So we have listened to this great presentation by him, and now we have completed the presentations in the 6th session, and we have various questions. One question is for Professor Gül. You talked about the importance of use of the screens at a very early age, and how can we make sure that the kids are kept away from the screens, even if the parents are careful about that at home, they will see it from the others, and how can we set boundaries accurately? Thank you for that. This is actually a subject that we're working on, and the parents are actually having a difficult time with that. The studies indicate that the kids are affected by the behaviors more than the words, and especially the young children learn by taking a model, and the parents should be very careful about their behavioral choices. For example, when the parent takes the phone in his hand, he should say, I am now doing it for my banking transactions, or I am doing a research, and then they will drop the phone. Most importantly, in order to limit the kids' relation with internet, the interaction with the family should be enriched. And one mistake that is often done is to give the phone to them so they will eat or they will remain silent. The recent studies indicates that the kids should not interact with technology at all before the age of 3. And when the kid is at home, they should turn off their devices and stay in touch. They should interact with their kids. And the kids below 3 are having a difficult time with eye contact. They are not making eye contact with their parents because they are using the screens, so they should not encounter the screens at all. And even if they see from the surrounding, they should be told that this is specific to that family, and in a proper manner. Some kids may choose not to eat certain foods and there might be problems with the food, and the parents should actually improve their own skills and they should act as a team, so it should not be an alternative to anything or reward of anything. Thank you, Professor. Zeynep Muharrem Devrenoğlu has given us an idea about it. She says, I adopted the smartphone usage short form inventory, and it can be used to evaluate the use by the teenagers and adults, adolescents. And finally, there is one question for you, Professor Mehmet. I will ask the question, then I will adjourn. Hayri Öztürk is asking, hello, Professor Mehmet. When we think about that at an international level, when you compare our works, our studies in respect of technology addiction with the other countries, where are we standing? This is actually very important because there is now an awareness across the world, and especially it has been further expanded with the pandemic. I can very proudly say that the first and most comprehensive Congress on technology addiction was held in Turkey in 2011, and the international activities were done later. The World Health Organization started working on it after 2014, and also European Addictive Behaviors Congress started later. So we have done important activities in this regard in Turkey already, and Turkish Green Crescent Society is holding the widest activity in this regard, and there is a module on the technology addiction, and there are presentations, booklets, videos, and they have been delicately prepared, and every year 10 million students and parents are receiving this education and Professor Gültekin has paid a lot of efforts in this regard. There is a very comprehensive network of service. There is no other rehabilitation system anywhere in the world with 105 branches. And as the Turkish Green Crescent Society, we are accessing so many people in 105 locations and helping the people who have difficulties with technology addiction. As Turkey, we are doing very well in terms of civil society to combat technology addiction, but I cannot say the same for policy making, but this is not the problem of our country only. This is very difficult to handle because this area keeps changing all the time, but there is a sensitivity in this regard, and that's why there is the Senior Council of Fighting Against the Addictions, and in this Senior Council, the behavioral addictions are also taken as a subject. And starting from this year, the Higher Education Council, who has made it obligatory to deliver a course on the technology addiction, and the content of this course has been prepared by Turkish Green Crescent Society and sent to the relevant universities, and that has been very important for us to raise awareness again. So much is being done in Turkey in order to combat technology addiction, and hopefully we will see the results. Yes, I am also personally closely following the activities of Turkish Green Crescent Society, and this is one of the examples. This is the 5th of the International Technology Congress, Addiction Congress. I would like to extend my gratitude to the professors, and ending the 6th session, I would like to give the floor back to Cansu Canan Özgen, and have a nice day. Thank you very much for this great moderation. I would like to thank Gül Karaçetin, Gültekin Öger. It has been very informative. And you have given us great clues. This was the 6th session today, and we will have a short break until 5 o'clock, and then we will be back. Thank you.